From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
We are marching today to remind people everywhere, our lawmakers especially, of the significance of science for our health and prosperity. The process of science has enabled humankind to discover the laws of nature. This understanding has in turn enabled us to feed and care for the world's billions, build great cities, establish effective governments, create global transportation systems, explore outer space, and know the cosmos.
Hundreds of thousands across the world take to the streets for the first ever global march for science, including Bill Nye the Science Guy. We'll bring you highlights of our special 5-hour broadcast from the March on Washington on Earth Day, and speak with those who attended, like Dr. Mona Hanna-Attisha, the doctor who discovered the connection between rising blood lead levels in the children of Flint, Michigan, with the switch to the Flint River as a water source. State officials initially dismissed her findings, but she refused to accept their denials.
The Flint story is a story of science. It took science to unravel this unbelievable tragedy. So we need to believe in science. We need to invest in science. If not, we have the risk of seeing many more Flints to come.
Today, the March for Science for the Hour. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. In France, former investment banker Emmanuel Macron and far-right politician Marine Le Pen are headed for a runoff after the first round of voting in the French presidential elections on Sunday. Macron came in first place in Sunday's vote, with Marine Le Pen in a close second. The results were a stunning rebuke of France's established parties, marking the first time in 6 decades that neither of France's two main parties advanced a candidate to the second round. On Sunday, Marine Le Pen, who has campaigned on an openly xenophobic and racist platform, claimed the survival of France is at stake in the May 7th runoff.
We've made the first step, which will take the French people to the Élysée Palace. This result is historic. It confers on me the immense responsibility of defending the French nation, its unity, its security, its culture, its prosperity, and its independence. The French people should seize the historic opportunity opening up to them, because what's at stake in this election is unbridled globalization, which is threatening our civilization.
Meanwhile, on Sunday, frontrunner Emmanuel Macron urged voters to support him against the threat of nationalists.
Je souhaite, dans 15 jours,
in 2 weeks, I want to become your president.
Le président de tout le peuple de France. Le
the president of all people of France. The president of patriots against the threat of nationalists.
U.S. Defense Secretary James Mattis has arrived in Kabul, Afghanistan, amidst a national day of mourning, following the deadliest Taliban attack on an Afghan military base in the last 16 years. On Friday, at least 140 Afghan soldiers were killed after Taliban militants disguised as soldiers drove onto a military base and opened fire on soldiers leaving Friday prayers. Some officials say as many as 200 soldiers died. The Afghan defense minister and army chief of staff have resigned in the wake of the attack. On Saturday, hundreds of thousands of scientists and science enthusiasts took to the streets around the world in a global march for science. More than 600 marches and rallies took place, one on every continent, including on Antarctica. Massive marches occurred from coast to coast in the United States, as well as in Rome, Berlin, Madrid, Vienna, London, Mexico City, Santiago, Chile, Sydney, Australia. Democracy Now! Was broadcasting live for 5 hours during the massive March for Science in Washington, D.C. On Earth Day, we'll bring you highlights after headlines. Tensions continue to rise between the U.S. and North Korea, as North Korea's detained U.S. citizen Tony Kim as he was planning to fly out of Pyongyang International Airport Saturday. Kim, also known by his Korean name, Kim Sang-duk, had been teaching at Pyongyang University of Science and Technology. On Sunday, North Korea threatened to sink a U.S. aircraft carrier that's conducting military drills along with Japanese ships in the waters off the Korean peninsula. President Donald Trump is facing criticism after he claimed to be a great friend of the Italian opera singer Luciano Pavarotti, who in fact died a decade ago and whose family has openly criticized Trump. On Thursday, Trump welcomed the Italian prime minister to the White House and praised Italy's contributions to world culture during a news conference.
Through the ages, your country has been a beacon of artistic and scientific achievement. That continues today. From Venice to Florence, from Verdi to Pavarotti, friend of mine, great friend of mine.
In fact, Pavarotti died in 2007. Last summer, Pavarotti's widow and 3 daughters asked the Trump campaign to stop using Pavarotti's music at campaign events, writing, quote, "The values of brotherhood and solidarity that Luciano Pavarotti upheld throughout his artistic career are incompatible with the world vision of the candidate Donald Trump," unquote. In Venezuela, President Nicolás Maduro has called for talks with the opposition amidst massive ongoing anti-government demonstrations. On Thursday and Friday, at least a dozen people died during violent anti-government street protests. Both government forces and armed opposition members have been responsible for deaths during demonstrations in recent weeks. Critics of President Maduro accuse him of plunging the country into an economic crisis. Defenders of the government blame failing oil prices and an ongoing U.S.-supported destabilization campaign against the leftist Venezuelan government. In the Maldives, 29-year-old prominent blogger Yamin Rashid has been murdered. In his writings, Rashid criticized both the Maldives government and Islamic extremists. He'd received numerous death threats before he was found stabbed to death in the stairwell of his apartment building Sunday. Back in the United States, the New York State Parole Board has denied parole to prisoner Judith Clark, who drove a getaway car during a 1981 robbery in Rockland County that left a security guard and 2 police officers dead. The robbery was aimed at expropriating money from a Brinks armored car for the Republic of New Africa. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo commuted Clark's sentence earlier this year, making her eligible for parole. But on Friday, the board said Clark was, quote, "still a symbol of violent and terroristic crime," unquote. In response, Clark's daughter, Harriet Clark, said, quote, "Parole decisions that fail to take rehabilitation into account are their own kind of violence and create their own kind of terror. My mother is not a symbol, but the dysfunctional and merciless parole board is, unfortunately, a symbol of the racism, classism, and immorality rampant in our criminal justice system," she said. Arkansas is seeking to carry out its first double execution in more than 16 years today. Death row prisoners Jack Jones and Marcel Williams filed a last-minute request for a stay of their executions with an appeals court Sunday. Arkansas carried out its first execution since 2005 on Thursday, killing Liddell Lee. In Michigan, the Grand Rapids Police Department is under fire after video surfaced showing police officers detaining a group of 12 to 14-year-old unarmed African-American boys at gunpoint, forcing them to lie on the pavement as the boys sobbed and said they didn't want to die.
Just follow our directions and we'll be all right. Get on the ground. Keep your hands out. Hey, come over here. Keep your hands where I can see them and get on the ground. Get on the ground.
What do we do?
We're giving you directions, okay?
I'm not going to die, bro.
I do not want to die. The words of one of the African-American boys who were stopped at gunpoint by the Grand Rapids police officers Friday while the boys were returning from playing basketball. On Florida, 28-year-old transgender woman Shay Reed was shot and killed in Miami Friday. Reed's friends described her as a lighthearted woman who loved to dance. She's at least the 9th transgender woman whose murder has been reported this year. British environmental activists celebrated a victory when Friday became the first full day since the late 1800s that Britain did not burn any coal in order to generate electricity. Hannah Martin with Greenpeace said, quote, "The first day without coal in Britain since the Industrial Revolution marks a watershed in the energy transition." And the winners of the 2017 prestigious Goldman Environmental Prize have been announced. Among them are community organizer Mark Lopez, who forced the state of California to conduct comprehensive lead testing and cleanup of a working-class Latino neighborhood in East Los Angeles; Guatemalan indigenous leader Rodrigo Tot, who won a historic court case that forced the government to issue land titles to indigenous people and block the expansion of a nickel mine; Indian social justice activist Prafula Samantara, who helped organize an indigenous tribe to resist a proposed open-pit aluminum mine in the eastern state of Odisha, Congolese park ranger Rodrigue Katembo, who went undercover to document corruption and bribery and the illegal push to drill for oil in the oldest national park in Africa. This is Katembo explaining how he was arrested and tortured for over 2 weeks during his investigation.
They took me at gunpoint. They tied me up and started to beat me very hard. They told me that I had brought shame to my country and that I would have to be killed today. I told them that many of my colleagues had already died. If I die today, it's not a problem. I am prepared to die.
The Goldman Prize winners also include Slovenian farmer Udos Mačerl, who organized against the burning of poisonous waste near his farm, and the Australian octogenarian Wendy Bowman, who faced off against a multinational coal mining company and won. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. On Saturday, hundreds of thousands of people took to the streets around the world in a global march for science that was endorsed by hundreds of scientific institutions, environmental groups, and unions. The Hip Hop Caucus was also a partner. More than 600 events took place, with one on every continent, including Antarctica, where workers at the Neumayer Station Research Center tweeted a picture of themselves holding a sign with a quote from chemist Marie Curie. It read, quote, "Nothing in life is to be feared. It is only to be understood. Now is the time to understand more so that we may fear less." The first ever March for Science coincided with Earth Day and comes as President Donald Trump has galvanized scientists, educators, and others with his comments calling climate change a Chinese hoax. Meanwhile, the White House's proposed budget would cut as much as $7 billion in science funding, including the National Institutes of Health, which funds medical research. Democracy Now! is at the March for Science in Washington, D.C., where thousands braved a stormy day to gather at the Washington Monument to hear speakers. You can watch our full-hour, 5-hour broadcast at democracynow.org. Today, we bring you some of the voices of the rally. In a minute, you'll hear from Dennis Hayes, coordinator of the first Earth Day in 1970, wildlife biologist Sam Droga from the U.S. Geological Survey, Mustafa Ali, former head of the Environmental Protection Agency's Environmental Justice Program, and James Balog, the filmmaker and ice photographer who founded the Extreme Ice Survey and is featured in the documentary Chasing Ice. But first, we go to Bill Nye, the Science Guy, the engineer and TV personality best known for the PBS series of the same name.
Greetings, greetings, fellow citizens. We are marching today to remind people everywhere, our lawmakers especially, of the significance of science for our health and prosperity. The process of science has enabled humankind to discover the laws of nature. This understanding has in turn enabled us to feed and care for the world's billions, build great cities, establish effective governments, create global transportation systems, explore outer space, and know the cosmos. The framers of the Constitution of the United States, which has become a model for constitutional governments everywhere, included Article 1, Section 8, which refers to promoting the progress of science and useful arts. Its intent is to motivate innovators and drive the economy by means of just laws. They knew that without the progress of science and useful arts, of engineering, our economy would falter. Without scientifically literate citizens, the United States, any country, in fact, cannot compete on the world stage. Yet today we have a great many lawmakers, not just here, but around the world, deliberately ignoring and actively suppressing science. Their inclination is misguided and in no one's best interest. Our lives are in every way improved by having clean water, reliable electricity, and access to electronic global information. Each is a product of scientific discoveries, diligent research, and thoughtful engineering. These vital services are connected to policy issues, which can only be addressed competently by understanding the natural laws in play. Some may consider science the purview of a special or separate type of citizen, one who pursues natural facts and generates numerical models for their own sakes. But our numbers here today show the world that science is for all. Our lawmakers must know and accept that science serves every one of us, every citizen of every nation and society. Science must shape policy. Science is universal. Science brings out the best in us. With an informed, optimistic view of the future, together, we can, dare I say it, save the world!
Mayor Lindsay had shut down Fifth Avenue, and we basically filled it all up.
Earth Day demonstrations began in practically every city and town in the United States this morning, the first massive nationwide protest against the pollution of the environment.
Nationally, Earth Day was the largest demonstration ever in American history, and we had an estimated 20 million across the country.
We are challenging the ethics of a society that, with only 6% of the world's population, accounts for more than half of its utilization of resources. We are systematically destroying our land, our streams, and our seas. It
was a huge, high adrenaline effort that, in the end, genuinely changed things. Before, there were people that opposed freeways, there were people that opposed clear-cutting, there were people worried about pesticides. They didn't think of themselves as having anything in common. After Earth Day, they were all part of an environmental movement.
Dennis Hayes.
Okay, this is a science march, so I assume you all knew there was going to be a quiz. This is about last November's election. Did America somehow vote to melt the polar ice caps and kill the coral reefs and acidify the oceans? Did we vote to reduce the EPA's research budget by a whopping 42%? Did we vote to defund safe drinking water by 1/3? Did we vote to eliminate environmental work in Chesapeake Bay and San Francisco Bay and Puget Sound and the Gulf of Mexico and the Great Lakes? Well, that's what we got. "47 years ago, on the first Earth Day, 20 million regular, everyday Americans, including millions of angry students, rose up and stormed the political stage and demanded a clean, healthy, just, resilient environment. 47 years later, to my astonishment, we're back in the same spot. We've got a president, a vice president, a cabinet, and the leadership of both houses of Congress who are all climate deniers. They are scrubbing climate change from federal websites and ordering federal employees not to use the words global warming in any communication. This is not conservative politics. This is the Inquisition gunning for Galileo. It's now crystal clear that the man who lives right there did not come here to drain the swamp. He's filling the swamp to overflowing with conflicts of interest, with a White House that reeks of greed and sleaze and mendacity. America has had 45 presidents, but we have never before had a president who was completely indifferent to the truth. Donald Trump makes Richard Nixon look like Diogenes. We are racing now toward a climate cliff, and our coal-loving president is punching the accelerator, and so millions of us are marching across America and around the world. Our job is clear. Today is the first step in a long-term battle for scientific integrity, a battle for transparency, a battle for survival. So don't leave here thinking that you came out in the rain, all of you, this awesome crowd, standing in the rain, freezing, and thinking, now you've done your part. Because you haven't, not yet. Like that first Earth Day, this Earth Day is just the beginning. And in that battle, losing is not an option, because if we lose this fight, we will pass on a desolate, impoverished planet for the next 100 generations. I'm old enough that I can remember when people all over the earth saw America as the world's best hope. Today, right here, right now, all of you, let's commit ourselves to becoming the world's best hope again.
Ali Mustafa Santiago.
So I'm about to take you to Jamaica real quick. I want everyone to say, get up. Stand up. Stand up for your rights. It's time to stand up. Like the legend Bob Marley said, get up, stand up for your rights. 35 years ago in Warren County, North Carolina, a small but committed African-American community decided to stand up and say no more. They decided to stand up against dangerous PCBs, a cancer-causing substance in their neighborhood. They decided to stand up to protect their lives, their neighbors, and the lives of the next generation. Today we stand against an administration that places profits over people and tells us that science isn't real, that rolls back regulations that for decades has protected and given people a fighting chance for clean air, clean water, and clean land. Today we must stand for community-based programs that give marginalized communities traction to address the disinvestments that have limited their opportunities for positive change. Today we must support our most vulnerable communities on their journey from surviving to thriving. Today we stand up for Standing Rock to protect and support, that's right, cultures that honor Mother Earth and the lives of our people. Today we stand up for Flint. Today we stand up for Baltimore. Today we stand up for East Chicago, where the devastating effects of lead will have long-term health and economic impacts. Today we stand with 71% of African Americans who live in counties that violate federal air pollution standards, and the 68% of African Americans who live within 30 miles of a coal-fired power plant. Today we stand with Latinos, who are 165% more likely to live in counties with unhealthy levels of power pollution. Today we stand with the 24 million Americans suffering from asthma and who are disproportionately at risk. Today we hold our public officials accountable. Today we stand for justice and make our collective voices heard. Today we stand up and we march. Everyone join me. Everyone say, get up. Stand up. Stand up for your rights.
Hi, I'm Sam Droege, the bee guy. I just realized that if all the bees disappeared, there's tons of unemployed scientists who'll do the pollination. So here's how it works. These are all the flowering plants in the world, thousands and thousands of them. They have a relationship, sometimes one-on-one, with thousands and thousands of different bee species. There's more than honeybees out there. You lose some of these plant species, you lose a whole chunk of bee species. The system works like this. They encapsulate the earth, the bees and the plants. Without them, you have little to nothing to live for. So here's what you need to do. You need to harbor all the natural areas that are the bank of plant biodiversity with their bees that keep it together. And personally, this is what you need to do. You're an activist. You probably have a lawn. You need to de-lawnify the world. Lawn's contribution is 0 to negative. I will do a paper on that later. But You can make a difference in just those small, different ways. Remember, my favorite quote from Emerson is, "The world laughs in flowers." Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm James Balog. I'm a patriot. I fight for spacious skies. I fight for amber waves of grain, for Purple Mountain's majesty. You all are patriots. But I do that by being a photographer, filmmaker, and scientist. We have met here today where a great battle for the mind, body, and soul of this country is being fought. Among other things, it is a battle between objective reality and ideological fiction. My team and I have collected visual evidence of the epic changes sweeping the earth today. I've seen how burning coal, oil, and gas cooks the air we breathe. I've seen how that altered air heats our forests until they explode in fireballs and homes burn down. I've seen through more than 1 million frames of time-lapse photography how trillions of tons of glacier ice are melting. I've seen that meltwater enter the seas and flood the coastlines of America. Nature isn't natural anymore. You and I and all 7.5 billion of us are changing the climate. It's what the real world evidence says. But you know, there's good news too. Each one of us can use our voices and our choices to take us down the road to a better future. I submit to you that we the people have an inalienable right, not just to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, but to clean air, clean water, and a stable climate. Our survival demands it, and our children deserve it. And so, empowered by evidence and real world's truth, we shall fight for spacious skies. We shall fight for amber waves of grain. We shall fight for majestic mountains, and we shall march on these streets. We shall never, ever surrender.
Some of the voices from Saturday's March for Science in Washington, D.C. Among others who spoke was Dr. Mona Hanna-Attisha, who discovered the connection between rising blood lead levels in the children of Flint, Michigan, with the switch to the Flint River as a water source. She says the Flint story is a story of science, and you'll hear from many others. Stay with us. That's John Batiste and Stay Human performing Higher Ground by Stevie Wonder at the March for Science in Washington, D.C. To see our whole full 5-hour broadcast he performed throughout, you can go to DemocracyNow.org. This is Democracy Now!, DemocracyNow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. As we bring you the voices from Saturday's March for Science that brought hundreds of thousands of people around the globe out on every continent. We were in Washington, D.C., as we turned to Dr. Mona Hanna-Attisha, the doctor who discovered the connection between the rising blood levels in the children of Flint, Michigan, and the switch to the Flint River as a water source. State officials initially dismissed her findings, but she refused to accept their denials. This is Dr. Mona's address at the march.
Hey, how's everyone doing? Woo! I am Dr. Mona Hanna-Attisha from Flint, Michigan, and it is great to be here. And I am here to tell you that the Flint water crisis is not over. We still cannot drink unfiltered water from our taps. So Flint is what happens when we dismiss science. Flint is what happens when we dismiss experts. Flint is what happens when we dismiss people. Flint is what happens when saving money is more important than public health. I am a pediatrician, and every day I use science to protect and restore the health of my patients, my kids. And about a year ago, my research proved that our contaminated water in Flint was leaching lead into the bodies of our children. And I took a risk. I walked out of my clinic to speak up publicly for my kids. Thank you. And I was attacked. But when you are fighting for children, you fight back. And I was loud and I was stubborn, and science spoke truth to power. Science is not an alternative fact. And it is time for all of us to fight back against those who deny science and those who degrade science. It is time for all of us to step out of our clinics, our classrooms, and labs. We need to make ourselves known into the halls of government. We need to hear all of your voices. Today, I march for science. And today, I march for our Flint kids. I am marching for our smart, our strong, our resilient, our beautiful Flint kids. They inspire me to continue to use science every day to make sure that their tomorrows are bright as ever. And I want you to meet one of our amazing Flint kids. And I hope that she and little girls just like her become scientists. But this little one has her eyes on that house, the White House, in 2044. So I want you guys to give a warm welcome to Mari Kopeny, also known to the world as Little Miss Flint.
Thank you, Dr. Mona. My name is Mari. I am a Flint kid, and I believe in science because Flint kids are smart, and we're brave, and most of all, we're strong. We knew something was wrong with our water. It was brown, and it smelled weird and tasted gross. It was burning my skin and giving me and my family rashes. My family and my neighbors knew something was wrong, but our state didn't want to believe in science. They didn't want to listen to us. They said we were wrong. And finally, scientists proved that our water was bad and that kids just like me are getting hurt. Over 8,000 kids under age 6 exposed to lead. Listen to me. When we don't believe in science, and especially when our government doesn't believe in science, kids get hurt. That's what happened in Flint. For the sake of Flint kids and for all over this world, I march for science.
That was Little Miss Flint and Dr. Mona Hanna-Attisha addressing the March for Science in Washington, D.C. I sat down with Dr. Mona in the midst of the stormy weather after she spoke and began by asking her why she came to Washington for the march.
How could I not come to Washington? How could you not be part of a March for Science? In my everyday as a pediatrician, I am moved by science. I am guided by science in my care of patients, in my protection of patients. The Flint story is a story of science. It took science to unravel this unbelievable tragedy. So we need to believe in science. We need to invest in science. If not, we have the risk of seeing many more Flints to come.
Explain what you did, how you used science
science to uncover what took place.
Absolutely. So I was very much doing my job as a pediatrician, as a researcher. When I heard about the possibility of lead in the water, I stopped sleeping. Lead is a potent, irreversible neurotoxin. It is damning for children and for generations to come. When I heard that there was lead in the water, I put on my research hat to see if that lead was getting into the bodies of our children, and it was. And instead of waiting to publish these findings in peer-reviewed journals, we held a press conference and we announced these findings because our kids did not have a day to spare. So I took a risk. I took a professional risk and stepped out of my box, out of my clinic, out of my lab, and advocated for my kids. And that's what needs to happen now every day. Scientists need to come out of our classrooms, out of our clinics, and out of our ivory towers to use our science to better our communities.
First, the governor of Michigan tried to discredit you, and then explain what happened.
Yeah, so I was dismissed in a long line of folks who were dismissed in the Flint story. Most importantly, the people of Flint were dismissed for 18 months. They were literally told to relax during this entire crisis. The moms, the pastors, the activists, the journalists, the water scientists, everybody was dismissed. And when I came out with the research that our children were being poisoned, I was also dismissed. I was called an unfortunate researcher, that I was causing near hysteria, which is a great sexist phrase, and that the state's numbers didn't add up to my numbers. So after a few weeks, the state actually looked back at their numbers and said, oh, actually, our numbers do match up with your numbers, and realized that we did have this massive crisis.
And what is happening today?
So today, we are almost in our 4th year of this ongoing crisis. The people of Flint, to this day, must still use filters and bottled water. We have had a great new settlement that will guarantee line replacement, the pipe replacement. That's going to take years to happen. We've been able to do a lot of things for the children, which is how I spend my everyday. Investments in early education, literacy, healthcare, nutrition. But we have not yet garnered the resources for the long-term recovery of these kids. These kids need resources for years, if not decades, to mitigate this crisis.
And the men who made this decision, the unelected city managers, have been indicted.
Yeah, there's been about 18 criminal charges, including those emergency managers, including folks who worked in our water quality department, including folks who worked in our public health department. So that accountability is incredibly important, and we need those ongoing investigations.
So you're here in Washington, D.C. You're a doctor. You're an Iraqi-American doctor.
Yeah, I'm a first-generation Iraqi-American. My parents immigrated here when I was about 4. If Trump's first immigration ban was in effect, I would not be here. So it's, we have immigrants all over in many of our most vulnerable communities serving, doing our privilege to serve our communities here in the States. It is frightening what would happen if Trump's immigration policies came into full effect, not only for the health care of our most vulnerable, but for the entire field of science, for the global partnerships that we have in science, and really for the future of our scientific discovery.
You wrote a piece in the New York Times, will we lose the doctor who should stop the next Flint?
Yeah, so, I've been given this incredible microphone this last year, and I once again felt it was my duty, my ethical and moral responsibility to raise my voice in regards to the immigration ban. So this precedent, these policies in regards to immigrants are totally contrary to everything that our country was based on. And, Flint is a perfect example. If those were in place, I wouldn't be here. I don't know what would have happened to Flint. I hope somebody else would have done the same thing I did. But there's examples day in and day out of immigrants serving this community.
I began by saying that on this day, we just learned this on the grounds of the mall. On this day, Vivek Murtha, the Surgeon General, has been fired. They're saying resign, but it's pretty clear he was fired. You knew him.
Yeah, he was a great physician. He was a great supporter of Flint. He actually came out to Flint twice during our water crisis in support of our efforts, tried to advocate for more resources for us, spoke with the people, had town hall meetings at churches, met with our physicians. He's been a great advocate of public health in general, the need for broader support and investment in public health. So it was heartbreaking to hear. I actually sent him a message on Twitter yesterday when I heard that he was asked to leave. he also spoke out against gun violence. Yes, absolutely. So he very much recognized, as physicians do recognize, that gun violence is a public health crisis. It is a public health issue, and we need to treat it as such, and we need to increase regulations on gun violence to protect our most vulnerable populations. And I think ultimately, I don't know for sure, but I think that's why he was asked to leave.
That's pediatrician Dr. Mona Hanna-Attisha, who discovered the connection between the rising blood lead levels in the children of her city of Flint, Michigan, with the switch to the Flint River as a water source. She says the Flint story is a story of science. This is Democracy Now! When we come back, young people take to the stage to talk about the importance of science. This is Democracy Now! Back in a minute.
We're gonna have a funky good time. Gonna have a funky good time. We're gonna have a funky good time. Gonna have a funky good time. We're gonna take you high.
John Batiste and Stay Human singing with jazz and funk trombonist Fred Wesley. We're going to have a funky good time by James Brown. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. They were performing at the March for Science in Washington, D.C. Hundreds of thousands of people came out on every continent for the March for Science. We were in D.C. for a special 5-hour broadcast. These are some more of the voices. We'll begin with the young people on the stage.
So I want to ask you guys a few questions. Do you shop online at Amazon? Do you use Google at least 10 times a day? Do you share pictures on Instagram? Well, all these technologies would not be possible without computer science. Computer science is a backbone of all the technology that we use today. My name is Kavi Kaparapu. I'm 16 years old, and I'm a junior at Thomas Jefferson High School for Science and Technology. And I'm here today for the future of computer science. Computer science is at the forefront of every field, so why don't we have an emphasis on computer science education? Only 40% of our schools offer computer science, which means, you do the math, we're missing 60% of our future Bill Gates, future Mark Zuckerbergs, and future innovation. To compete as a country, we need to compute. Without computer science, our economy would come to a halt. Innovation in medicine would cease. Our space program would not exist. Hope for a greener future would be crushed. Computer science is the foundation for the future. It's a future of robotic surgeries, driverless cars, artificial intelligence, virtual reality. And women should be the driving force of this future innovation. Computer science is for all. That's why I founded Girls Computing League. It's a nonprofit that empowers girls to pursue computer science in middle and high school. We need more girls in computer science. We need more diversity in computer science. In my future career, I don't want to be known as a girl that happens to be a computer scientist. I want to be known as a computer scientist that happens to be a girl. Today, I am marching for computer science to be for all ages, all genders, and all races. Today, I am marching for computer science for all. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Taylor Richardson, and I live in Jacksonville, Florida. I'm 13 years old, and I'm not just a black girl who's interested in STEM, but I'm a black girl who rocks STEM. I will be an engineer, a scientist, and an astronaut, and will eventually go to Mars. I'm marching because I want all girls, especially girls of color, to know that they can be a part of STEM and even be leaders in STEM. But like Muhammad Ali said, you better get used to me. Yes, you better get used to us girls and women because we're not going anywhere. Science is not a boys' game. It is not a girls' game. It's an everyone's game. I want girls to know we can educate each other and advocate for legislation to support science and engage others in our community. I stand here on the shoulders of giants. Mathematician Katherine Johnson, who helped us go to the moon. Rocket scientist Annie Easley, Dr. Mae Jemison, the first African-American woman in space. And won't be the last. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Dr. Caroline Solomon, and I am a biologist. I got spinal meningitis when I was 15 months old. I am lucky to be alive today, and I have science to thank for that. The vaccine for that disease was developed after I had the disease. The only impact on my life was that I got deaf. I am thrilled to be here today in honor of science. We are celebrating science, and we are celebrating the fact that everyone brings their own unique perspective to how we do science. Deaf people are visual learners. There are studies being done right now by deaf scientists on bird songs. They're not listening to the songs. They're looking at visual readouts on computer screens and studying the songs through visual technology. That's the kind of impact that deaf scientists can have on our world.
Hello, my name is Dr. Jessica Ware, and I'm here representing Rutgers University, Newark, and I'm a member of the Entomological Society of America. I'm an evolutionary biologist and an entomologist. Evolution. Evolutionary biology and entomology, which is the study of insects, are disciplines for everyone. I'm a single mom to 2 children. I'm a black female punk rocker with an LGBT family. My son and my identical twin are transgender, and I belong here. I belong in science. I'm part of a global community of entomologists and evolutionary biologists. The study of insects is by definition international, global, and collaborative. Insects don't see borders, and they can cross walls. The Entomological Society of America is the largest insect science organization in the world, and we seek to improve the lives of the world's citizens by promoting biological diversity and developing safer food production. We're working to save pollinators while limiting pests and vectors of disease. We need to fund integrated pest management, which is an aspect of entomology that ensures food safety for humanity. Entomology is a vital science, and we seek to unravel past and current patterns of biodiversity and mediate threats to human health, like Zika, malaria, dengue, yellow fever, and chikungunya. Evolutionary biologists seek to understand which species are found where and why, and we need to continue to fund evolutionary study through the maintenance and growth of natural history collections and museums, through funding field expeditions to go out and describe new species before they go extinct.
Hi, everybody. My name is Kellen, and I'm here representing public health. When I say public, you say health. Public health, public health. Yes. Woo! We all know that science is about data, but we need to remember that data tell stories. We all have a story. My story is that I'm a public health geek and a policy wonk. I'm also a queer transgender man. And science helps make sure my community and I are counted, and we count in decisions that affect our lives. Science is about all of us. It's my friend Amy, a bench scientist who's working to break new ground in the treatment of diabetes. Science is my mother, a citizen scientist who contributes the data from her backyard bird feeder, Cornell Lab of Ornithology. And science is my fellow PhD students at the Johns Hopkins School of Public Health. Who do research to inform policy decisions like the Affordable Care Act to ensure we all have the right to good health. But it's not enough to collect data. We need to share it. Advocacy is not a dirty word. Science is objective, but science is not neutral. The poet Dante wrote that the hottest places in hell are reserved for those who remain neutral in times of moral crisis. We cannot pretend we are above the fray. Science is objective, but it's not neutral. As scientists, as human beings, our mandate is clear. It's for each of us to stand up for what we know to be true. And to stand together when working to shape a future in which we can all thrive. Thank you. Public health!
I'm Sean Otto, author of The War on Science. We're gathered here today to defend this fundamental principle, to tell our elected leaders that attacking science is attacking democracy. Denying science is denying democracy. And rejecting science is rejecting democracy. The greatest freedom and the greatest equality come not from the PR campaigns of wealthy corporations, nor from the demands of impassioned ideologues, but from public policies based on evidence. So we say to our elected leaders, the war on science must end. The evidence shows that global warming is real, that vaccines do not cause autism, that research drives prosperity, that there are no such things as alternative facts, and that if you want America to succeed, Donald Trump, you can't lead it with your brain tied behind your back.
Hello, science lovers, and a special sago to all the members of the American Indian Science and Engineering Society, observers of nature, water protectors, and defenders of Mother Earth. I'm Mary Jo Andrikin, professor of chemistry at Northeastern University, a Mohawk and a scientist. My research group and I work on interpreting the genome and on understanding how enzymes work. And where does this take us? To finding new ways to prevent and treat disease, to developing renewable energy systems, to designing new ways to make chemicals that are friendlier to the planet. We are also training our young people for the jobs of today and tomorrow. There is growing global demand for solutions in medical technology, clean energy, environmental protection, and biological and cyber threat detection. Innovations mean new industries and new jobs. The United States can and should be the world leader in these innovations, but this depends on investment today in scientific research and education, in the NSF and the NIH. To all the students of science, maybe it's discouraging to know that some of our national leaders today do not believe in what we as scientists are doing. But I promise you, we will prevail.
Just some of the voices from the March for Science in Washington, D.C. Hundreds of thousands came out around the world. Thousands came down in the downpour to the National Mall. Among those who came from around the country to participate was Julia Olson, Executive Director and Chief Legal Counsel for Our Children's Trust, which has filed a landmark lawsuit on behalf of 21 young people under the age of 21. The lawsuit alleges the government's failed to take necessary action to curtail fossil fuel emissions. I spoke to Olson and some of her young clients.
I'm Julia Olson. I'm the Executive Director of Our Children's Trust, and I'm a lawyer representing 21 young people who filed a lawsuit against the government. They're now suing the Trump administration and the whole fossil fuel industry for violating their fundamental constitutional rights to a climate system that will protect them and their future.
So, but this, I remember when we broadcast from Stanford University, you were suing the Obama administration.
That's right. And now we have a new president and a new administration that is denying the facts of climate change. And so it's a very interesting situation where Obama admitted that these kids are facing a crisis, and now we have an administration working hand in hand with the industry to fight them.
And on what grounds are you suing?
It's a case under the U.S. Constitution. This is about the Fifth Amendment and these young people's rights to life, liberty, and property. It's also their right to have their public trust resources, like their atmosphere and their oceans, protected for them and for their kids and grandkids.
So why don't you introduce us to some of the plaintiffs right here?
I'd love to. So over here.
We're passing a sign that says President Trump and fossil fuel industry, #YouthGov, see you in court.
So this is Hazel. She's one of our younger plaintiffs, and Hazel's from Eugene, Oregon.
Hazel, can you talk about why you're here today in your T-shirt in the pouring rain?
Well, I'm from Oregon, and in Oregon, all it does is rain. And it's extremely important for us young people to stand up to our government, where the adults are doing nothing to prevent climate change and to stop the harmful effects of ocean acidification and sea level rising.
How old are you?
I'm 12 years old.
How did you get involved with this lawsuit?
Well, I went to a camp with Julia Olson. I met Kelsey Juliana, and I became very inspired by her and many of the other plaintiffs that are now on this case. And I believed in this cause. We have hope and we have the power to change.
What do you think is getting in the way?
I think our president currently, who I feel is one of the biggest climate deniers with a pretty substantial control of power, and he does not believe that science is real. He thinks it's a hoax made up by the Chinese, but we have science to prove him wrong. We will see him in court, and we will win.
Voices from the March for Science on Earth Day, on Saturday in Washington, D.C. You can watch our entire 5-hour special broadcast at DemocracyNow.org. And you can tune in next Saturday, April 29th, for our special broadcast of the People's Climate March in Washington, D.C. I want to dedicate today's show to a beautiful 8-year-old boy named Elijah Simpson Sundell. He loved science. He was an inveterate shutterbug. He loved to take pictures. We recently spent the afternoon at the American Museum of Natural History. His dad, Brad Simpson, was a Democracy Now! Producer and a historian. His mom, Kristen Sundell, a human rights activist. Elijah lost his brave struggle against cancer, against DIPG, this weekend, but he will forever be remembered. And that does it for our broadcast. We're on our 60-city tour, and I'll be speaking today at Wesleyan College at noon, and tonight in Cambridge with Noam Chomsky. On Tuesday, I'll be at the Harvard Science Center at 11 a.m. and at Yale at 3:30. Mount Holyoke will be next in South Hadley, Massachusetts at 7:30 p.m. tomorrow night. From there, we cover Vermont. We'll be in Middlebury, Vermont at noon on Wednesday. At 7 p.m. we'll be in Montpelier. On Thursday, Bennington, Vermont at noon, and at Burlington, Vermont at 7 p.m. You can check all the details. We'll then head to Washington, D.C. to cover the march, the People's Climate March, and then we are on from there. Check all details at democracynow.org. Democracy Now! Is produced by Mike Burke, Dina Guzder, Nermeen Sheikh, Carla Wills, Laura Gottesdiener, Sam Alcoff, John Hamilton, Robbie Karen, Hani Massoud, Sharina Nadura, Andre Lewis, Mike DeFilippo, Miguel Noguera, Paul Huckabee are our engineers. Special thanks to Renee Feltz and to Dennis Moynihan, to Becca Staley and to Julie Crosby, Hugh Grant, David Prude, R.L. Boone, Vesta Godars, and Anthony Manzo. After we cover the People's Climate March on Saturday in Washington, D.C., we'll be speaking in Washington, D.C., as well as Raleigh-Durham on Monday, Miami, Florida on Tuesday, Tampa, Florida on Wednesday, Atlanta, Georgia on Thursday, Northfield, Minnesota, then Minneapolis on Friday, then on to Madison, Wisconsin. I'm Amy Goodman. Thanks for joining us.